Perfect. All right. Welcome, everybody. Like Jasmine had said, feel free to go through, chat in the Q&A. We got people watching that. Ask whatever you want to go through and ask, and we'll do our best to answer it for you live. I will get started by going through and sharing my screen. And today, what we're going to be looking at is the wonderful customs editor. I do love the customs editor. It's sometimes I joke that it's kind of like Filevine art. I can't say that I originated that comment. Another team members of ours did, but it is kind of like an art project sometimes, especially as you go through and you dig into it. So we're going to just do a general overview, and then I want to go through and talk about some of the specific things and like common practices that we see, common downfalls that we see, information like that as we go through. So stop me whenever, y'all, but otherwise we'll just hop right into it.
And for those of you that are like, hey, where do I get to go to Customs Editor? It's through that advanced tab there in the top left. If you don't see the advanced menu, you'll need to chat with your Filevine admin or the admin at your firm to get you added if that's something that you need. This advanced tab is an additional layer of permission that certain folks have. Whatever's changed back here in the advanced menu is changed for the entire org. So that's why it's selectively given out to make sure that, folks just aren't able to make sweeping changes across the whole org and kind of change any processes that are going on.
Perfect. Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, so yes, I've gone through and I've already done a few different steps. Just going through, and I've gotten to our advanced, and I've picked on customs editor, and then I've also picked my template. First things, as you go through and you sign in, if you're a member of more than one organization, you'll see something kind of like right here where it says VineScale Sandbox. It may be grayed out if you don't have or access to another org, but you would want to go through and click there and then click the appropriate organization that you're in. Once you're there, you can go through and click kind of where it says BS motor vehicle premise. This is an old template of ours that's no longer in use. You can see we have a bunch of different templates in there. You can also hide different templates too as well. So these ones that are a little grayed out, those ones are hidden. It's easy to go through and hide and show these different templates by clicking on that settings gear, and then coming here, you can change your abbreviation, the name of it. If it's your favorited, then it's going to be right here at the top. And then if it is visible to this org, that means that new projects can be created within this template. So actually, since this is an old one, I'm going through, I'm going to turn it off for now because it's not one that we're actively going through and using. So that's just general part of it. You'll notice right away we have a few different sections, a few different tabs here. We have our sections, our vitals, our phases, and our folders. And most of the stuff that we're going to be doing today is going to be within the sections. But just to quickly touch on the others, of course, we have our vitals. And these are going to be, this is how you would go through and you set up your different vitals here on the right side. You can see as I click through all of them, with these fields, we have like QuickBooks case costs, and then it says that it comes from the settlement section. And we just overrode that title by writing QuickBooks case costs there. You can add up to, I believe it's 15 different vitals, and they can be either something from a static section, which is going to be things like probably your intake or your case summary. A collection section is going to be something where one of these pages where you see the add item and an item at the top. And with those ones, we can't pull specific details from each of those, but we can get some other numbers. So if I want to see for like meds, I can see my total meds. Total, oh, there we go. Here, like insurance, I can do average med pay, highest med pay, lowest med pay, total med pay. Those are the types of things that you're going to be able to get from collection sections. So just keep that in mind as you're going through and building out your vitals. But it's very easy to do. You just come here, you pick your field, hit OK, and then you can rename it if you want. Test me. And then there is this visibility option. And this is great. Let's say if you have a business process where you only want to see litigation files if you've actually gone through and filed a lawsuit and you have, let's say, the litigation section shown, because you can, through manage sections, hide, unhide the different sections like so. All right, so yeah, you can't see those anymore. So you can have vitals just be based on, hey, if this section is visible to everyone, we want this vital to appear. So you can get pretty creative with how you go through and you use that. Let's see here. Okay, and then phases will be the next one. The phases, of course, that's how you're going through and you're using Filevine. You can create them all here. Pretty easy to do. And then you can also show phases only when a specific section is visible too. So much like with that litigation example, you could have a phase that is litigation or filed suit or mediation, deposition, however you're doing it, discovery. You can go through, put it there, and say, hey, I only want to see this phase when that litigation section is turned on. That kind of helps. You set up some of these rules to help make sure that team members are using Filevine correctly. Oh, absolutely. I will go through. There's a question, how to add a question to the intake section. Example, yes, no, or a check mark. We will go through and we will get to that. I'm going to go through and finish talking about these sections and then we'll address that because that's where most of our time is. The last part is your folders. You can create a folder template here in the background. These are some of the replacement fields that you can use that can go through and pull information into the actual base folder name. And we can really build it out how we want to. Say you just put my, I want to go through, click on name. I'm going to add medicals. So then now if I save this, any new projects created in this template would have that folder in it. This isn't going to go through and be retroactive though to cases that have already been created. So just keep that in mind if you're updating another one. Okay, cool. So that's just the basic overall of these 3 different tabs up here. We're not going to worry too much about them. Otherwise, they're pretty limited in what you can do besides the things that we talked about. We'll probably come back to the folders at one point, but we'll start taking a look at actually using the customs editor. So you'll see in customs editor, we have each of these different sections. Activity, which is built in. Anything that says built in, we're not going to be able to go through and edit. That's something that Filevine has gone through and built already, and so it's limited just to make sure that the functionality continues to be there. It works. But these other ones, you can see custom fields. This is a static section. I know that this is a custom fields collection section. And you can go through in each of these too. If there's a section you're no longer using, you can make it always hidden if you want. If you want to go through and have something like litigation where it's turned on later, you can also have it as initially hidden. If you have something hidden, you're not going to be able to go through and report on that. So just keep that in mind as well. Okay. So you can also add little notes here too, I should say, especially if there's, if you have, let's say, automations, likely it'll say in there, hey, there's automations, do not edit these fields. That's generally what Filevine does, and that's what we do too as well. Okay, so looking at our custom section setup, I know right away it's a little bit like, okay, it's not crystal clear exactly what each of these things are. We can compare 2 pages at the same time, so you can see, that intake title, and then we have a couple date fields and a person field. You can see that too. So we have our intake header. And we have our incident date, date of intake, person performing intake. And you can also see how these are organized too. So for each of these fields, we have our row number, which is that first number here. And then we have our column number. So kind of think of it as like a spreadsheet. I say generally, I don't like to go through and put more than 4 on one row, just because if let's say if someone's using a laptop, it's going to make it harder for them to go through and actually see the fields. The date fields might get squished. You might only see part of a date field or part of a dollar field. And that's not going to be as helpful for team members, especially when they're trying to just quickly look at information or quickly add information in.
And that I'm using. Sorry, I was going to say, if you have the vitals open, that also shrinks down the screen where your data is put in. So adding in more than 4 fields is going to be quite a lot. There are some fields where even having 2 on a line makes them a little bit more squished. And so I'm sure Derek will go over hey, here's some tips and tricks on which ones are good for 4, which ones you might want to think to just have by themselves on a line as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say too, when I'm going through and I'm creating fields, I'm editing customs editor, I have the option to use a full screen monitor or my laptop screen since I do work from my MacBook. And I actually always edit just on my MacBook so that I can see the most compressed version of it. So that I know, hey, if you have a laptop user, they're going to be able to see all of the things that they need to be able to see. Okay, so oh, I guess too, we can talk about, yeah, these invisible kind of lines for like, if it was like a spreadsheet. So you can see like client's preferred language and is the client a minor, both appear in the exact same row. When I come back here to my collection section, client's preferred language, row 6, and then is client a minor, we have 6-1, and then we have another field here. If so, name a personal representative. So if I go through and I hit yes, then that goes and appears on the same line as well. Okay, so really, once you've gone through and to answer your question about how to add a question, it's pretty simple to go through and do. I like to determine, hey, where exactly do I want my question to appear? So if it's somewhere up here at the top, or if it needs to be, in the middle, just kind of know where that field is, and then you can go through and you can add your field there. We have our fields, and then we have widgets, and they're different types, different functions between them all. Just to go through and add just a simple yes, no, one of the most popular fields, we can add it here, and I'll write my question in saying, let's see here. Let's find a good one that would make sense. Oh, here we go. Is the client married? Oops. You see when I start to type out my prompt that the field selector will start to go through and fill out as well. This field selector is what you're going to see when you're building reports, when you're building documents, docgens, things like that. And if I click on my advanced properties, I can decide which row I want it to be in, which I want it to go through and be row 7, because I can tell that's where my spouse question is. And I actually want this one to be the first question. So I'm going to go through and I'll create that. And then I am going to, I will say we do use spacers for formatting just to kind of help things. And we'll talk more too on that. You can see this gets pushed all the way over here to the left. But if I remove this widget and then I move my spouse to 7-1 and update that, it doesn't show it live, but if I go through and I refresh, we'll be able to see our changes. Perfect. So is the client married? And then now we have spouse. So adding these two together, I really don't want the spouse person field to show if the client is unmarried. So if they're not married, I want to be able to hide this, or I want to be able to show it. And what we can do is we can come through here in the background and go to the field that you want to conditionally show or hide. And down here in the advanced properties, I have a couple options. I can do show or hide. And then let's see here, when all of these other questions or fields, we can have them equal or contain specific information. So if I do, is the client married? And I can say either equals, not equals, contains, or not contains. Here, since it's just a regular yes, no question, I'm going to go through and I'm just going to say equals yes. Perfect. So we refresh. Is the client married? They mark yes. Now the spouse appears. Wonderful.
If you are going to be adding fields into an already existing section, I'm forgetful. So when I'm moving items around, the first thing I do when I'm adding a new field is type in where I want it to live, because if I go through and like select the field type and type in the name, I'm likely going to forget where I needed to put it. Derek has a better memory than I do. but I usually go in
Not
and
true.
and type that in first just so that I don't forget where I need it to live. And it gets easier as time. As you saw, Derek had 7-0 in customs editor. 0 is the first position. I know that's like counterintuitive, but
Yeah.
0 is automatically going to be that first position. Any number you put after that, so spouse could be on 7-3 and it's still going to show up right next to the other field as long as there's nothing else on that line. So yeah, you can type in kind of whatever number. It's not going to be weird spacing in the front end or anything like that. It will allow for it to show up right next to it, which is nice if you're like, I know it needs to be 7, but I'm not sure exactly where after the 0. So you can put in kind of whatever you need there.
Yes. And I have seen there are some people to help kind of keep things in mind. Too, they will go through and they'll add their set like 7-0, and then the next one they'll come with and it'll be 7-2, because it's instead of like, oh, this is this first one, it's the second one. So whatever works for you, there's not quite a wrong way to do it, because it's all going to function the same way. I would just say, 6 is probably too high of a number. I don't think I need to go that high. I could probably get away with 4 if I want, because I would not recommend we put 6 fields on the same row.
And then as you see, Derek has a project open. Anytime you're editing in customs editor, it's best practice to have a project open. That way you can see your changes in real time. If you need to make adjustments, you can pop back into customs editor, make those adjustments, and again, refresh and see those edits and updates in real time on your project.
Yep. You are able to go through and see, if you were to click right here, what it would look like with fake data. So if you're building a new template, but you haven't created a project, this is the way to go. I would say, though, that when we have, or I don't like to go through and use this view, because that means I have to close out exactly where I was at, and then I have to go find it again. And I just find that it's not as quick. Just for sharing or screen sharing today, I'm showing, both on the same tab. But normally what I do is, if you have more than one screen, I would use those 2 screens. It makes it a lot faster overall. I will say with this field, I want to go through, and when I'm looking here and I'm in the project, and I go through and answer this question: is the client married? Yes, it makes sense what we see, which is the spouse field to go through and pop up. However, when I'm in the background here, I don't see those rules. I don't know that that's hidden. So if I go through and, let's say, delete that question for is the client married, and I don't realize necessarily that I don't actually know if we can delete it. Let me actually try that first, because I think we used to be able to, and we can't now. Oh, no, we can. So this goes through and it defaults back to always, which is nice, but it could, if you, let's say you have maybe 20 questions associated, or 20 different conditions associated to just that one yes, no question, it's a lot of cleanup afterwards for that. So I want to go through and recreate that field, and I'll show you the best practice with it. We try to keep all of our templates like this, and as I build things too, I want to make it as simple and easy to edit later on in the future. So I'll add my yes, no, is the client married? I'll add that one more time. This is 7. Only I know that because we did talk about it so many times. I don't know how many times I've created a field, and then I have to come all the way to the bottom to fix it. Especially a little difficult when you have longer sections. Okay, so is the client married? Perfect. What I want to do here, once I set my show when is the client married equals yes, is I'm going to write that right here in the internal notes. They are optional, but I find that they're very helpful. So show when is the client married equals, and you can put quotes here, not put quotes there, however you want to go through and do it. This is just generally how I like to say, show what the field is. And then if it's not equals, I'll write the actual words out, and then what your answer needs to be here. So now you can't see that on the front side, but now as I scroll through, I can see, okay, spouse it's conditional. It's only going to appear if the question is the client married equals yes. So it's just kind of a way to help take care of yourself for in the future, because with Filevine's always evolving. They're always improving Filevine. When I first started with Filevine, there weren't calculated fields. And so, once they released those amazing fields, and I had to go through and I had to fix them, but we didn't have it set up like that. So I've definitely learned from those mistakes on there. It is nice to go through and just put the information there. I know, oh, here's another one referred from. So show when referral source contains referral. You can see how that breaks down to show with contains.
And the benefit of using contains for that one, sorry, Erica.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. The benefit of using contains for that one is it allows for that field to show when multiple things are selected on the front end. So we have like client referral and attorney referral and professional referral. Anytime any of those is selected, that referred from is going to pop up. That's super useful and helpful because, as you saw, there's only one condition you're able to add for each field. And so if you are like, hey, for instance, we do this a lot with our case types, right? For personal injury, if you have motor vehicle collision and a dog bite and premise liability, you want to know the location of the accident or incident. You only will be able to see those if you have something that connects all of those other items together. So for instance, in this one, referral is the thing that connects all three of those options so that we can put that referred from. You may have to get a little creative, like I mentioned on the incident types, motor vehicle collision, dog bite, premise. None of those really have anything in common as far as words go. So you may want to add special characters to your fields to get those to show. And Erica, did you have something, or was that what you were going to say?
No, I was just going to mention a moment ago, Derek, you mentioned having to do some cleanup. And while we were in the intake section, it reminded me that for any of our folks watching that are either using Lead Docket or planning to use Lead Docket in the future, just keep in mind if you remove or rename those fields, it can throw off some mapping with Lead Docket, since the Lead Docket information does map to that intake section. Just wanted to mention that.
Very good point. That also would apply then if we're looking at like reporting too as well. If you're reporting on a specific field, you would need to update all of those reports if you did remove that field or obsolete it and you're using a different field instead. So of course, it's a lot easier to go through and edit each of these sections when there's no data. But if you do have data, of course you have data in there for older ones. Just think about how do we go through and get that data moved over to? Are we going to do a manual migration, or are we going to talk to a team like VineSkills to go through and help with that? Here, to continue on what Jasmine was saying, here's those special characters that we use in this insurance section for health insurance and workers' comp. They don't match for, looks like the LOR. Nope, not the LOR. The claim number and policy limits, those are hidden if there's an asterisk in there. So that's how we get creative. I would say try not to get too creative. I have seen ones that have like star, backslash, dash. It's probably a bit too much. So might want to think about spreading that information out if possible. Just because I like to say a good section is one that someone who has experience with Filevine but doesn't know the section can go in and find everything. If you overbuild and you make things too complex, like this yes no question is only appears if this yes no question appears and this yes no question appears, that's a little too complicated, and chances are it's not going to work for every case scenario. And unfortunately, we would love to, as going through and working with legal software, we'd love to plan for every case scenario, but it doesn't work quite like that. I just say make it simple and then kind of build upon it as you go. It's a lot easier to build towards than remove from. And let me get back to my intake section. Okay, cool. So that talks, adding fields, the basics there, showing or how to organize your fields, how to read the fields too as well. I will say if you want to move a field, let's say I want to add something on between this. Oh, I want to go. Yeah, that's a terrible one to pick because I already have a spacer there. let's say I want to add something between this incident type and then this question here, client's role in accident. If I can go through and I can just find one of the numbers in a row and I can hit this down arrow and it will shift all of the fields below that down one. So now I have row 13 is blank. So now I could go through and I can add something like, let's say, a line break, which would be, I use instructions, and I generally would say a line spacer or something to that effect, and then just go through and do a bunch of underscores.
One
then when
thing
this
to
is
note-
saved,
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, Derek used line spacer here for this widget name. If you use a line spacer in multiple locations, you will have to have a unique widget name. So you can do line spacer 1, line spacer 2, something like that. The system will throw an error if you try to use line spacer as the widget name for every single time you're adding in a spacer like that.
Yep, you can only have one name for each field because they each have to have their own unique widget name, unique widget selector. If you do go through and you try to use a similar one, I've seen ones where it starts to number these. I recommend not doing that. I just recommend doing it yourself. It's like line spacer 1, because for instructions, you can't see the actual titles for it. Those don't appear in the actual section itself. When I say line spacers, it'd be these lines right here, like kind of help format it, make it a little bit more visually appealing and easier to read. The same thing applies with these blank space. Oh, so like this is spacer 7.2. This is a blank space here. I don't generally put the numbers there because chances are you're going to end up moving those fields at some other point. Let's see here. Oh, perfect. So like spacer 4.2 is originally where this one started. That is just a blank space right here to help keep this formatted. If you do calculated fields or drop downs, if you have like this referral source right here, if there was nothing else on this line, I would have a blank spacer to be right next to it and then another one so that I only have this small box. Otherwise, this referral source dropdown will fill up the entire screen, which just isn't as visually appealing. Okay, so those are our spacers. Kind of looking at our widgets, I mentioned we have our fields and then we have our actual widgets. So your fields are going to be, generally, this is what you see most. We have amount fields, and then we do have our calculated fields, which are going to be calculated from all of these amounts. Dates, case number. Case number is, not all firms use this. But it is a way to go through. You can add this field and it will override your project ID when it comes down to reporting information. If you just pull your project number instead, the project ID naturally appears right here. So I generally say, hey, it's usually better to not use a case number field for the end user. Like if you don't have to, I wouldn't, just because I can just then, I can copy that right there and I can paste it and I can find the exact one. So it makes it really easy to be like, hey, Erica, can you take a look at John Smith Jr.? But if we have two different John Smiths Juniors, it may be a little bit confusing. That's why I like the actual ID number. So just keep that in mind if you do add the case number. It does work, and I have seen firms use it very successfully. It's just a personal preference of mine. So think of that too as with your team member, or your team members as well. We have our deadline fields, which a lot of will be are going to be looking more towards your let's see, like statute reminders and government claims, anything that you have that hard deadline. Then you're going to want to go through and pick a deadline field, because then this will go through and I'll add it to your calendar too as well, compared to a regular date field, which is really, really nice. When you do build these, make sure you choose your correct reminder schedule. By default, I believe it's 180, 150, 120, 90, 60. There's so many notifications on your feed for these reminders that sometimes people just stop paying attention to them because they're just constantly seeing them. And that's, it's no good. We have hard deadlines that we have to be able to meet. So I would highly recommend customizing a reminder schedule. And then when you build in deadline fields like this, go through and go through and choose a different one. And I like to usually format them like this. That's 100, 180, 120, 90, 60. So then I know exactly what my time frame is, and I don't have to go through and open up another section. So that's just makes it a little bit easier, especially if you're creating a list of, let's say, deadline fields. If we look at our litigation section, all of these right here, would it be very difficult to go through and do it. Tracy, Jasmine mentioned at the beginning, but of course you missed that, I'm sure. Sorry. We will have it on our website. So vinestills.com, there is a tab at the very top. You'll see that it says free help. So it'll be probably a couple days. We'll have it up there and you'll be able to go through and watch from the beginning.
I'll resend the link to that in the chat, because I think that if you jumped on late, you might not have seen the stuff in the chat. So I'll repost all of it.
Cool. Awesome. So those are our deadlines. We do have our drop-down fields, also a very common one. I will say, if you find team members, if you find that team members are not choosing your drop-downs, like they're not filling them out, they're skipping over them, you can switch them to multiple choice. I find that this helps solve that issue a lot. I don't know what it is, but sometimes people, they just miss the drop-down fields. But it's a lot harder to miss a field if it's an actual multiple choice question, because it will build it out. Like, was the client we can edit that. I can show you what that would look like. Let me hit just Command F or Control F, and I can say, was the client. Perfect. Fastest way to go through and find your field, because the titles here are going to be same as the titles there too. So you can really just copy and paste too as you're looking. So I'm going to open this. I'm going to change it to a multiple choice. And I'll do a quick refresh. Always refresh after you make changes in the customs editor for them to apply. And so then now it appears like this. So of course, if something to drop down, if you're having a drop down of all 50 states, probably not going to work well with a multiple choice field. But if you have, yes, no, pending, things like that, multiple choice is a good way to do it. Wonderful. Let me go through and I will change that back.
Where you can be specific about the field type that you choose, do that. So for instance, if you have a set amount of items that can be chosen, like here in this drop-down list, it's much better to have them spelled out as opposed to leaving it as an open text field. Reporting, especially, if somebody types in driver with a capital D, driver with a lowercase d, they get creative and start adding in additional words. Reporting isn't going to know that all of those options are the exact same. So your reports aren't going to be as accurate as they can be. So that's why, again, it's important to, where you can, utilize specific fields. So those yes, no fields, the drop downs, your multi-select, anything that you can be specific in, especially like the amount fields. If you're going to use calculated currencies or calculated values, definitely use the amount fields. Don't allow for that creative freedom where people can type the $sign. Some people don't type the $sign. There's lots of variation.
Yeah, and we're all human and mistakes happen. I know I already had to apologize one time for, I called it fat fingering over here because I wrote something like this. Super simple mistake. There's 2 R's on there. It's easy to go through and do. And then, yes, if we had some sort of report building in the background, depending on if you're working with me in advanced reporting, I get very specific. And so I like drop downs for those, because I'm not able to go through and create different things based on these fields. There's just too much variation. So definitely best practice there. Use drop downs and built-in features when you can. So looking at other fields, we have a file attachment fields. This would work well, if you're attaching just one document. I generally go to multiple file attachments. That way, then if there's some sort of, even though it's, you're looking for one letter, but I want to say I have an email that I wrote about said letter. I can easily, if I wanted to, I can screenshot it and then I can put that in there too, just kind of attach them. When you do pick one of these, you can set up your tags in the background. So if you have any pre-approved tags, let's see here. Let's just do test. Okay, so like here, test, it's gray, and I normally say if it's gray, that means it's not approved as a firm tag. But like witness testimony, this one is color coordinated, so I would say it's approved. Just quick tip there. You can click that. And then if you do have folders set up, you can choose exactly where they go to as well.
And the multi-attachment is good, again, if you happen to have more than one. But in Customs Editor, once you start adding documents, so let's say you're like, we're never going to have more than one, let's just do the single file attachment. And then down the line you do, it is very difficult to change those fields once data has been added to them. You can only like obsolete them. And once you start obsoleting several fields, it's going to slow down your Filevine. And so where you can, help yourself out in advance, definitely do that. Those multiple attachment fields is one of them. It allows you to just put one in and nobody knows that, there's 15 more that you can add. But if you do have them, again, you have that flexibility.
Yep, because I can go through and just attach these here. It's easy to go through and review. And I just find that, like you said, help yourself. If you need to make that adjustment in the future, you can't really, because I don't think you can just change it between 1 and 2. You can't change it for multiple, just a single, because chances are you have more than one at some point. Now that same thing goes to when we'll talk about widgets. I use that same logic for doc generation widgets and report fusion widgets too. Back with our fields, I do want to mention this incident date. This date is where you're supposed to go through and keep your incident. It's built in as the incident fields when you're looking at doc gens, when you're looking at reporting. It's great to have. Don't use more than one though. You can potentially add them to more than one section. And if you do that, it's going to cause issues. Only add one incident date. Don't go through and add another one in there. If you're using an old date field and you're wanting to update it to an incident date, you can add that in there, but then I would manually move all that information over. Just keep that in mind. The only reason I say it is because I've heard of a story very recently where there was an issue because there were 2 incident dates and it was a complete headache, and we don't want that. We want things to be smooth. So just keep that in mind.
And Derek, there's a question. I need to break out one of our sections so that we have multiple DocGen fields available and could use your advice. We've gone beyond the 30 limit. And then also we've done this before, but curious if you have a tip on an easy way to move the templates from one field to another.
Yeah. So if you're going through, and it will be manual, but what I would say is create your field exactly where you want it, how you want it, have your tag set up, and then really, because if you're moving them in the same, we're moving them in the same section, so that we have multiple DocGen fields available. Okay, yeah. Okay, same section. What I would do then is, let's see, we might not have documents set up somewhere because this is our test sandbox. What I would do really is I would download all the documents that I want to move over from right here. And then when it comes down to adding templates, then I would just go through and I would just select them all right there, and then you're good to go. Because if they're in the same section, then you shouldn't have to go through and update your fields or the logic that you use when you're building it. It should just be pretty easy to just move them over to the new template. And then if you have a DocGen map, which I do suggest having, go through and update that too as well. Absolutely. Happy to answer that for you.
And you can also, if you've gone beyond like the 30 in a template, you can get more granular in the widget and then utilize maybe conditional logic to hide or show, so you don't see every single DocGen widget option, but only, hey, I only need to generate these specific documents if this is selected, and kind of narrowing it down that way instead of doing general like request. Maybe you have it specified provider request and then client request or something along those lines.
Very good point. Let me go through and get back to my, oh no, where'd it go? See, this is, oh, did I hide it? Very well might have hid it. Let's see here. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, so looking at that, Okay, just to quickly run through the rest of these two, you can use multi-select lists. These are going to be checkboxes that allow you to check more than one thing. A lot of times we do use this within a med section, just because we could have some conditions that go through and affect the client. So if I look at my meds, I can show you a quick little example of how we use it. So status, check all that apply, actively treating. If there's some unrelated treatment here, I can mark that too. If you are trying to build conditions based on a multiple, well, there, wait, where'd it go? Multi-select list, then you're going to want to use the word contains. Do not use equals. You would say contains, like contains pending right here. And that would, then if I have this one checked off, then I could have fields that go through and show. We have our person field, which is going to be very common. Our person list, where you can list more than one person. It works well, especially if you have like multiple counsel. Just be aware though, that when it comes down to reporting, it's hard to go through and separate that information from them. Any of these list fields, generally, even though you see it as more than one item, here, like the, let's see here, should we have, do we have a list? Okay, like add person, and I write, I think I'm in here. And let's see here, Tony Stark. Perfect. Right here, if I'm like trying to report on addresses, it's going to list my address, and then it's going to put a comma behind it, and then it's going to list the next address. So just keep that in mind too for reporting. I'd prefer to do single person if possible.
And with the person fields, you are able to narrow it down. So if you're like, hey, we have all of our medical providers already listed in our contacts, you can narrow it down so that when you search for a name in that field, it's only going to search for folks that have that specific contact type. Similar to when you create a project, you can remove that filter, but this just helps, again, to narrow it down in the beginning so that if you do have those folks in there, you don't have to search through, like you saw, we had about 10 Tony Starks. And so it's helpful in those situations.
Absolutely. And I'll say too, if you have something like the team assignments here where you have your own contact card, you can see if we go through, I believe we have our filter applied here. Well, we don't have filters applied there, which, oops, we should have. I liked, if you don't have one already, I would create a contact type in the contact setup over here. That's like for us, it'd be Vine Skills team, or, you know, it's team member, employee, something where it's clear that this is internal team. And then I like to usually have like a former or an alumni as well. So that, you know, if I've gone through and I'm at the firm and now I'm off to my next grand adventure, you'd want to switch my contact card to alumni or former, just to kind of keep that organized, and then to take them out of the list, but still keep your records there. Oops. Okay, so then with the project link and project link list, what this is going to do, it's going to link two different projects together. And it's going to kind of be, well, if you go down to your, like a related cases section, whatever your section is, looks like this. You'll see, you know, related projects here, and then you'll see linked projects. The biggest thing is reporting. I can report and pull information from these linked projects, albeit limited. But if I want to go through and report, let's say, you know, there's a parent with minor children, like I would want to link those together. If you do a single project link, you can only do one different project. So let's say you are doing an intake as you have a template that's an actual intake, which I don't recommend, but I have seen it before. Then you can have a project link to be like, here's their intake project too. Of course, then with our text lines, I will say the single line list, that all the same things that we talked about where you have the list, those also apply, where it's going to have the comma at the very end. So while it's tempting to have a text single line list for dates, I don't recommend it if you're really wanting to report on things like that. But if it's like notes, things that you're not necessarily going to report on, I think that these are perfect.
Text is one of the few fields that once you create, you can change to a different type of text field. So if you start with a single line, you're like, hey, we're typing in a lot of data. It's difficult to see in a straight line. I want it to be multi-lines. You can change it after you've created it. Almost any other field type, you cannot change once you've created it. So you do want to be cautious as you're coming in to customs editor to create fields. But again, you're specific which one with which one you want, and also making sure that it's going to accurately give you the data that you need so that later down the line, you don't have to worry about trying to switch it.
Absolutely.
And then there's another perfect. Yeah, it really is. Especially with obsoleting fields and all of that. There's another question, Derek. We always struggle with how to link projects. We have a project with 10 children, but we have to manually add all of the basic data into each one. Maybe on another free help session, we can definitely go over that topic. I know we're close to time, but not sure if you have any like quick tips.
That is difficult. Because you're probably saying all the basic data, like all the basic intake data, information like that. What I would go through and do is I would use your title, really. So I would build it, and then I would link all those projects in, and then in like the guardian, the parent, then I would write something like 1/10. Well, there should be 1/11 if there's 10 children and a parent. And then each of them, you just kind of go through and number it. You develop that system and say like, hey, this is what that means. So you can see, okay, there's 11 projects that are going to be tied together, and this is the very first one. Some people use the word master. I don't really like that. So I generally do the numbers on top of each other. But then that way you can keep all of it in your actual initial project, your basic information, like your intake information, all of that. And then, yeah, the using master is clunky. I don't like it. I just don't like it at all. But then, yeah, here it's what this 1/11. We know what it means as a team. We know there's one. This is the very first project. So all of our intake, case summary, all of that's going to be here. And then if we want to look at individual information, like things such as, this is personal injury. So liens or meds, anything like that. I want to go to my specific project to do that and look at it there.
And you can always utilize hashtags as well. If you're like, we still want to be able to see that it's a master case and the numbers might not be as clear in that, you can always add a tag. Yeah, primary, whatever you kind of need to there. And those show up in your project hub. You can filter by them, all of that good stuff.
Tags are amazing. Okay, so then I will say too, if you have projects AI or any AI, you want to have a multiple lines or multiple lines large. I find that multiple lines is generally large enough for what you're going to need it for. Just because as you go through, do I have a multiple lines one?
Just about.
There we go. Yeah. Like here, then I can still go through and I can expand it. But you would need, if you're using like AI analysis, you're going to have to have a multiple lines one. And then URL and URL list. Let's say if there's I've gone through on Google Maps and I figured out exactly where that accident was. I can go through and I can get that link and I can just put it here in a URL field. And then it does appear with a quick little button. You click on it and it's going to open it up in a new tab for you. I know we're almost out of time. I need to cover these widgets though, just quickly. We have a handful of them. So I will say, generally you have subsection headers for in here, which are going to go through and they're going to look like, let's say like this right here with a line under it. If you use a subsection header, then you can go through and you can also click on the fields and it can help pull you down on that nifty table of contents in there. However, at the same time, if you have something like this one I can tell is just instructions. And what it's happened is we've just used the formatting instructions here to be able to go through and it's make it larger text. So it's bolded, and then it has either a dash or an equal sign under it. That's what makes it larger. You can't use that instruction text appear in your table of contents. So if you want something to stick out, but you don't want it to list in your table of contents, use instruction text. Then with also with our widgets, we talked a little bit about docgens, report fusions, outlaw templates. If you have outlaw, FVDA, you'll go through and you'll be using those a lot. And then action buttons, very wonderful. A lot of uses for them. You can either do link to a video, you can have it open, or like a video or a different link, have it open up in a new tab, or you can have it reload on that page as well.
You can also have it linked to a section in Filevine. So if you get meds information during your intake, but you don't want to lose your spot in intake, you can have it linked to the meds section in that same project and be able to add the data in and not lose your place in the intake.
Yep. So if I come here to meds, I can copy this. Now I can paste that URL here. However, if I save it like this, it's always just going to open up Tony Stark versus Black Widows meds. So I can click on this little question mark. Actually, I had never clicked on this, but Jasmine taught me to do this once upon a time. I was always just guessing to see if it worked. And here are some fields that you can replace. So I can just take project ID, and then I can replace the project ID right here. And that now, if I go through and I save this, and when I go and I actually click on the button, it would take me to that project's meds. That's how that would go through and work. I will say just action buttons, because I find that these do work a lot. You can do send email button. Of course, you have your available replacement fields, which are very nice. And then you can also do a task flow trigger button. So of course, as you build your tasks, or if I go through and I say this here, I can build my tasks in the background, which would be another one, another free help, but you can go through and you can also use replacement fields there as well. So if I'm saying, hey, I need someone to follow up on a medical provider, I can create it, and I have a button in there. I can create a task that says, please follow up on medical provider full name field. And then when they click that button, it would automatically generate. I use task buttons a lot. I love them. Oh, yes. Bonus points for using a funny button icon. Absolutely. My available replacement fields link work. So if you're having, if you're having that, you might have some not great practices in just in your fields. You might have too many obsolete fields where it's going through and slowing things down. If you go through and you talk to your account manager, they should be able to go through and help you get those fields. Or if you're working with us, talk to us and we can help you get those fields. But that's probably what it is. Also, sometimes people will build contacts into contacts, and that can slow down your reporting in your fields a lot.
The other thing that you can do, if you're seeing any issues like that, anything with Filevine that you're like, hey, this doesn't seem right, we were able to pull these fields and we're not now, you can always chat into Filevine support. They've transitioned to a live help format, so it'll be like a Zoom. That question mark at the top will take you to support, or you can type in support.filevine.com. In the bottom right-hand corner, there's a chat option. You can click on that and let them know what your issue is. They'll add you to a queue, and then they'll actually start a Zoom call with you so that you can share your screen, let them know the issue, and they can try to further diagnose the issue. If they're not able to answer it on that Zoom call, they'll open up a support ticket and have somebody look further into the issue and then get back to you, or set up another Zoom meeting to kind of, again, work through your issue. It should not do a 404 error. Sometimes you do need to like clear out your cache and your cookies and all of that good stuff. And that might help with getting that to go ahead and start loading again.
Yep. They should be able to help you, or they'll be able to pull it for you too. They might be able to help you figure out exactly why it's happening, if it's happening to everybody as well.
And they did change the no worries. They changed the available replacement field list so that you can pull individual sections now, as opposed to having to pull the entire list. So things like your client name, all of that is pretty standard across all of your sections, no matter what. But there are specific fields that maybe you want to pull. And so they just released, I think maybe a month, maybe less, the ability for you to pick individual sections to generate the data from, and that might help with slowness if that is something that you're experiencing. Obviously, a 404 error, you're not even able to get to this, but if you're seeing slowness, you can definitely work to do individual sections.
Absolutely.
Perfect. I know we're over time, so my apologies. I did want to point out, Derek mentioned those multi-line text boxes or fields. Those are things that you'll likely want to keep 1 to a line, maybe 2, because the smaller you get, the less you're able to see. You're going to have to drag it down quite a bit if you have a lot of data in there. Things like deadline with reminder fields are also something you probably only want to put at most 2 items on a line, because otherwise it gets a little bit squished. We do have the ability here at Vine Skills to help you out with any of those items. So if you do have a ton of obsolete fields that you're looking to clean up, we can help with that. We can help with customs editor. Derek, again, a guru at reporting, so he can kind of help with that. We run the gamut on all things Filevine. So if you'd ever like to engage in our services, feel free to reach out. I put all 3 of our email addresses in the chat. And so we'd be happy to, again, help connect you or help answer questions that we can, or get you connected back with your Filevine rep to get anything handled there. This recording will be on our website probably tomorrow or Friday at the latest. We do have all of our previous sessions recorded as well, so feel free to take a look. Our topics do vary every week, so feel free to check out our website to see what coming down the pipeline. And if you have suggestions for free help sessions, definitely feel free to reach out and send those our way. I think Tracy, maybe you sent one over with those link fields and adding that to our free help session repertoire. So we definitely appreciate all of the feedback that you all have, and would love to continue hearing it. Derek has pulled up our videos. You'll see we have a special one for free help, and then we do have them listed, other videos listed for other topics as well. But thank you all so much. Thank you, Derek and Erica, for all of your help today. Hopefully everybody has a great rest of your day, and hopefully we see you again soon.
Thanks all.
Bye, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.